Today we're going to talk about linear equations in two variables. We'll start with the definition. The slope-intercept form of the line is given by the equation y equals mx plus b, where m represents the slope of the line and b is the y value of the y-intercept. Now the slope of the line is given by the equation m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, where you have two ordered pairs that are on the line x1, y1 and x2, y2. So you take the y from your second point minus the y from your first point over the x from your second point minus the x from your first point. It does not matter which point you call your first point and which ordered pair you call your second point as long as you're consistent. So let's do some examples. Let's determine the slope of the line that passes through the following pairs of points. First we'll do -4, -3, and 2, 5, -5. So remember the equation takes the y from your second point minus the y from your first point over the x from your second point minus the x from your first point. Now remember, when you subtract a negative, that's really adding, so this becomes -5 plus 3 over 2 plus 4. Combine that together, you get -2 over 6, and always reduce your fractions. So you get a slope of -1/3. So your rise over run, -1 means you go down 1, over +3 means you go to the right 3. Let's do another example. Let's do the ordered pair 3/2, 1, and 1, -4/3. So again, we'll take our y from our second point minus the y from our first point over the x from our second point minus the x from our first point. Now we're dealing with fractions. Remember, when you add or subtract with fractions, you're going to have to find a common denominator. On the top here, the common denominator is going to be 3, and on the bottom here, the common denominator is going to be 2. Once you have common denominators, you can subtract or add their numerators over that denominator. And now we have -7/3 over -1/2. So we're taking and dividing fractions. To divide with fractions, you multiply by the reciprocal. Combine that together. A negative times a negative is a positive. 7 times 2 is 14. 3 times 1 is 3. So we have a slope of 14/3, which means we rise up 14 and run to the right 3. Let's do another example. -2, 7, and 1, 7. So we'll take the y from our second point minus the y from our first point over the x from our second point minus the x from our first point. And remember, subtracting a negative is really adding. So 7 minus 7 gives us 0 over 1 minus -2 becomes 1 plus 2 or 3. And then always reduce 0 over 3 is 0. Now notice the slope is not in fraction form here, but it is in here, so we can use this to discuss our rise over run. So a rise over run of 0 over 3 means you would go up 0 and to the right 3. Well, if you're not going up, but you're going right or even left, then you're staying horizontal. So let's note a couple things. Horizontal lines, these are the ones that go straight across the horizon like that, can be written y equals a number, and they have a slope of 0. Vertical lines, these are the lines that go straight up and down. They can be written in the form x equals a number, and they have undefined slopes. Think of it this way. If you're going straight up and down, you rise, you run, you're not going left or right, so you're rising a number divided by 0. Remember, you can't divide by 0. That value's undefined, which is why vertical lines have an undefined slope. So let's determine the slope of these lines that are written in equation form. For example, 4x minus 3y equals 12. Now we said that the equation of the line y equals mx plus b, the number in front of x was m, that's your slope. Well, these aren't in y equals mx plus b form, so we're going to have to put the equation in y equals mx plus b form to determine the slope. So the first thing we need to do is get rid of the 4x. We're going to solve for y and get y by itself. So we'll subtract 4x from both sides. 12 and 4x are not like terms, so we keep them separate. But we still don't have y by itself, so we need to get rid of that -3. So we'll divide both sides by -3. Now you're dividing this entire side by -3, which means you need to divide each of the pieces. The -4 needs to be divided by -3, and so does the 12. And then we reduce. Negative over negative becomes a positive, and the 12 divided by -3 becomes a -4. So now we have the equation in y equals mx plus b form. Now we can look at the number in front of the x, and we can determine that the slope of this line is 4/3. Let's do that again. 2x plus 7y equals 9. Again, we're going to have to put this into y equals mx plus b form. So we'll start by getting rid of the 2x and subtract that from both sides. When we do, we're left with 7y equals negative 2x plus 9. Now, y is still not by itself, so we're going to have to divide both sides by 7. Just like we did before, dividing this entire side by 7 means you need to divide each of the pieces by 7. So we're going to separate that out. Negative 2 over 7 does not reduce. Neither does 9 over 7. So the equation of this line is negative 2 sevenths x plus 9 sevenths. So the slope, now that this is in y equals mx plus b form, the slope is the number in front of x, and we see that the slope of this line is negative 2 sevenths. Let's look at another example, x equals negative 3/4. Notice this is x equals a number, there's no y, and if you recall to a couple minutes ago, we said x equals a number forms a vertical line, and vertical lines have undefined slope. The last example here, y equals 9. There's no x in this value, in this equation, it's just y equals a number, and as we said a little bit ago, that means that this is a horizontal line, and so the slope is 0. Now, if the equation of a non-vertical line in x and y is solved for y, the result is in slope-intercept form, which we discussed at the beginning of this section, y equals mx plus b. If you recall, m is the slope, and b is the y value of the y-intercept. So the y-intercept would be 0, b. If the variable x does not appear, as the last example we just did, then that means it's a horizontal line. You just have y equals b, and the slope is 0. So just keep that in mind as you're going through examples. So let's find the equation of the line that passes through the point 0, 3 and has a slope of negative 3/5. Notice it goes through this point 0, 3. We just discovered that when x is 0, whatever the y value is, that's your y-intercept. So since we just said that b is the y value of the y-intercept, from here we can determine that b is 3. So we have this in the equation, y equals negative 3/5 x plus 3. Not a whole lot of work we had to do there since we knew that the 0, 3 gave us b and m was given to us. Let's look at another example. And now we want to graph the line. So to graph the line, remember, we know that the ordered pair 0, 3 is on there, so we can graph that point right here. Now the slope is negative 3/5, so negative 3 over 5. Rise over run. Negative 3 would mean we go down 3, and a positive 5 would mean we go right 5. Down 3, right 5. Or we could actually move that negative to the bottom, so starting here, we could have positive 3 over negative 5. Positive 3 would mean go up 3. Negative 5 would mean go left 5. Up 3, left 5. And once you have 3, 4, 5 dots in a row, then you can draw a straight line connecting those, and that's how you graph the equation of the line. So let's take a look at another example. Let's find the equation in slope-intercept form of the line that passes through these 2 points, negative 3, negative 2, and 1, 6. So to write the equation of the line, the first thing you need to have is a slope. So we have 2 points. Since the slope isn't given to us, we'll have to find it. Take the y from our second point minus the y from our first point over the x from our second point minus the x from our first point. We get 8 over 4, and always reduce your slope, so our slope is 2. So now we have the slope, and we need to have y equals mx plus b. We need to fill in our other constant, which in this case is b. We have a slope in 2 points, and both of those points we know are solutions, so both of those x, y's we know will give us a true statement on the graph. So all we have to do for y equals mx plus b to find b is to pick one of those points. We know m is 2, so we'll pick the first point. Doesn't matter if you pick the first or the second. And we'll plug in the x and y. So we plug in negative 3 for x and negative 2 for y. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Add 6 to both sides, and we get b equals 4. So now we found m to be 2, we just found b to be 4, so the equation of this line is y equals 2x plus 4. So now we have another definition. 2 lines on a plane that never intersect are called parallel lines, and parallel lines have the same exact slope. 2 lines on a plane that intersect at a right angle are called perpendicular lines, and perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. Opposite meaning one of the slopes is positive, the other one is negative, and reciprocal meaning you flip the fraction. So for example, consider the following lines. We have line 1 and line 2. Line 1 and line 2, which are parallel, and line 3 and line 1 are are perpendicular, which means they meet at a right angle. So if we knew that the slope of L1 was 2/3, let's find the slope of L2. Well, since they're parallel, they have the same slope, so we know L2 would have a slope of 2/3. And now let's find the slope of L3, the perpendicular one. Since it's perpendicular, it has opposite reciprocal. So since L1 is positive, then L3 would be negative, and the reciprocal of 2/3 would be 3/2. So the slope of the perpendicular line would be -3/2. So now, if we were given the equation 2x plus 4, let's find the equation that's parallel and the one that's perpendicular that goes through the ordered pair 4, -5. So we'll do the parallel line first. This equation's already in y equals mx plus b form, so we can figure out that the slope is 2. If it wasn't in y equals mx plus b form, we would have to put it in y equals mx plus b form like we did in an earlier example. Since the line's parallel, we know that the slope is going to be the same. So we have a slope and a point, we can plug in our y equals mx plus b. Plug in m equals 2, x equals 4, y equals -5. Solve for b, and we would get b equals -13. So we have a slope and a y-intercept. The equation of the parallel line is y equals 2x minus 13. Now for the perpendicular line. The perpendicular line is going to have the opposite, so it's going to be negative, reciprocal, so 1/2 slope. So the slope is -1/2. Still going through the ordered pair 4, -5. So y equals mx plus b, we'll plug in -5 for y, -1/2 for m, and 4 for x, and solve for b. And when we do, we get -3 is your b. So now we can plug that into the equation, and the perpendicular line is y equals -1/2 x minus 3. That's it for this section. See you next time.